Hey, do you know what's better than the post-Christmas blahs? Chatting with us on Telegram. Join us on Telegram. We're still cool.
This is the Analysis in Chains with Nathan Williams and Neal Kieran.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Analysis in Chains. It's the holiday. Neal and I are both taking it off, so I'm pre-recording this. And I don't do as well without Neal. I always do better with Neal. Neal, I miss you. But one of the things I thought would be good to do for this between Christmas and New Year's episode is just do a short overview of what a stablecoin is. We've talked a bit about stablecoins, about how probably in 2019 they're going to be interesting. More companies are going to use them. But now is probably a good time to go over exactly what they are and how they work. So if you're familiar with proof of work coins, Bitcoin, episode 46, I went over how proof of work operates. Essentially, you've got a certain number of immutable tokens that are mined out of a system or given in rewards to people who help maintain the network. You've got also traditional utility token coins, which are usually created in either a fixed number or according to an algorithm and given out according to certain rules and then used in the system. And the reason we saw so much price instability last year in 2017, 2018 was because you would have companies creating a fixed number of coins or tokens and distributing them, selling them. People would speculate on what their value would be, and their intrinsic value was based on belief that they were going to build a system, because essentially people would sell these and then use the money to build a system. And the more speculation there was, the higher the price was, and it was just pure supply and demand with nothing really underpinning them. So, I mean, you can make the argument that fiat is the same way, but fiat tends to be a lot more stable than crypto ever was. So the idea behind a stablecoin is this. If you want businesses to use your token, if you want payments to be made with your token, if you want staking to be done or whatever, no one can price how much the transaction will cost. Not effectively anyway, because the prices are way too unstable. So people are thinking, well, what if we had coins that are more stabilized? Either we, maybe they get bound to an asset, or maybe they get bound to a basket of goods, or maybe the supply and demand is regulated in a decentralized way in order to keep the price from going up and down. Now, that flies in the face of the traditional utility token, right? Because most people, when they made utility tokens, they were making them because they wanted the price to go way up. There was an incentive to have that price unstable because people wanted to make millions of dollars overnight, right? It's sort of the unspoken truth. I mean, a lot of people spoke it, but a lot of people just wouldn't say it out loud. But most utility tokens that went out there were unfortunately driven by this speculation. And if you wanted a stable coin, you usually wouldn't build it into a utility protocol system because most companies were funding themselves. Maybe not most, but enough companies were funding themselves with the sale of their tokens that they really wanted that price to go up. And what we saw was that 90% of the value in those utility tokens was gone. It evaporated last year. Most of the reason for that was because the systems weren't built yet. People weren't adopting it the way they thought they would. Systems were complicated. They take a while to build, and people just lost confidence that they were going to see a return out of that coin. Now, the thing is, well, actually, let me back up here. One other reason that this is a problem is if you're expecting a coin to increase in value, you have a disincentive to spend it. If it's really a utility token and you want to use it in the system, you buy a Binance coin, you want to vote on what gets listed in Binance, or if you buy another type of ICO coin and you want to use it within that system, if the price is potentially going to go up by 10,000%, do you really want to spend it? If Bitcoin is going to go from 2,000 to 20,000, do you really want to use it to pay for your coffee or whatever? Wouldn't you rather hold on to it just in case? And this is essentially a problem. It's hard to classify something as a currency or even as a store of value if you're expecting it to gain in value. And it's not a hard and fast rule, but it definitely acted as a disincentive to adoption. So this is why more projects and companies that are going into crypto are starting to look at stablecoins as a solution. So what is a stablecoin? Well, there's a couple of different ways of doing a stablecoin. You could either do the easiest stablecoin, which is to peg it to the value of a US dollar or a euro or another fiat currency. How do you do this? In a very centralized way. Basically, if you give me $1, I put $1 in the bank, and then I issue one token. This is how Tether works, US dollar Tether. And if you've ever exchanged Bitcoin for Tether in order to facilitate fast trading, in theory, that is how it works. They ended up coming under investigation for the thought that perhaps more Tether existed than US dollars in a bank account existed. But nevertheless, that was the ultimate theory behind Tether. The way that you need to do that is with a regulated financial entity. It essentially becomes backed by an asset. And as much as it's a currency, it's also a security because you're expecting $1 to be there secured in some sort of holding account backing that Tether so that you can, at any time, you can go and exchange that Tether. Now, there's more than one way of doing this. The problem, obviously, with something like Tether is, even in its purest form, with all that trust, is you end up having it back to the US dollar, which is not 100% stable in itself. It varies with other fiat currencies. So some companies that we've interviewed have not only done other currencies the same thing, but some of them have done like sort of a basket of currencies or even a basket of goods. So how do you do that? Well, you can regulate the supply of your coin based on a group of currencies that get put into a group of bank accounts. Okay, so you take an average value of those and create a certain number of coins that represents that value. So if so basically very similar to what I described with Tether. If I have 10 currencies and I've got $1 million each of 10 different currencies, and I've got that's 10 million tokens, and then you would issue 10 million tokens, one for each one of the different currencies that's in there, and then you get a currency that has a backing of an average value of a basket of currencies. So the advantage of this is it's not pegged to any one currency. It is more stable in a global context. Obviously, the disadvantage is the currencies have to be sort of worth each other, or you have to identify how much one currency is worth of another. But, that's not an impossible problem to solve. But it won't be stable to any one fiat. So what you're trading off there is instead of being able to say, okay, well, this is always worth $1 or €1, you're saying, okay, well, this is always going to be somewhat stable to an average amount, which means it will vary to the price of it will vary to each one of those currencies, just not by the same amount and not by enormous amounts. You're expecting it to be more or less stabilized in the range that all of these other fiats are stabilizing. So you're not going to see like 100,000% swing in a couple of days, but you might see day-to-day variance. And then there's the third way of doing it. And earlier this year, we interviewed Haven, which has rebranded as Synthetics. And then there's some others where they do dynamic creation and deletion of coins in order to stabilize a currency. So this allows them to do it in a decentralized way. So everything that we've talked about before involved having a bank account with a certain amount of fiat in it. But what if you did a non-securitized way? Now, this is an interesting one because this is actually a pure utility/currency token. There's no US dollars or euros or Swiss francs or anything backing it. What you would do is you would say, okay, well, there's a certain amount of money required by the market to do transactions. And so we need a certain amount of money in that market. So we will give people benefit to creating or burning tokens in a decentralized way so that people will create money or burn money in order to maintain that balance of supply and demand so that the stabilized coin is more or less in line with the US dollar or the euro or whichever currency you want it. It's a little bit more complicated to do it that way, but it eliminates the need for a centralized holding entity. So those are three ways that you can create a stable coin. Question is, how do you make money on it? Right? Everyone was all excited about this, 10x return, 20x return, but how do you make money on a stable coin? Well, how do people make money on fiat currencies? Number one is with just fees. So exchange fees. With Tether, you wouldn't buy it for $1. You would buy it for $1 and like a cent. And that cent goes to the transaction of running the network. Easy. Okay. But you can also do most things with a stablecoin that you could do with a utility token. You can create a stabilized token and run a smart contract with it or run payments with it. You can create a utility token that people have to stake in order to run nodes that has a stabilized value. What is the trade-off? The trade-off is you either have to have a very complex system, like this decentralized adjusting of the values system, or you have to have a trusted, financially regulated entity in order to create that stablecoin. But once it's created, you can have people hold it, have people stake it, have people use it in any way that you do a utility token. So I think that we're going to see more of these projects because if people are receiving payments in tokens, if people are giving payments in tokens, and if people want to see their projects actually be projects, then they can do it by stable coins. So one last thought. With stablecoins does mean that we are moving away from the Wild West where individuals will create their own projects, raise large sums of money, and go and create their project. It was an exciting time. It was probably once in a lifetime. With the advent of the stablecoin, we're probably looking at a more traditional fundraising method for crypto startups. Probably they will go and actually have to create a system that the stablecoin works on before selling coins. And investors likely won't invest in the token itself if it's a stablecoin because they want a 10, 20x return. Likely we're going to see business models that involve taking fees like every other coin, which may become more centralized, or maybe we'll see interesting business models where they will continue to be decentralized. But either way, we're probably looking at more a shift towards equity and a shift towards more traditional fundraising and venture capital routes for crypto startups. It's hard to say at this point. All this to say that 2019 will not be the same as the crypto Wild West that we've seen in the past, for good or for ill. So have a great new year, and Neal and I will be back with more exciting analysis in chains in 2019.